I love Hunter x Hunter. Nearly everything about this narrative clicks with me. The characters, the battles, the settings, the themes. There's just so much to unpack with a show like this. And while Hunter x Hunter does contain many loud, striking moments, one of Yoshihiro Togashi's strongest attributes is his subtlety. The slow, quiet tone shift that takes place throughout this series has already been well documented, but that's just one facet of Hunter x Hunter's masterful transitions. As a whole, Hunter x Hunter's story progression feels natural. Each arc flows seamlessly into the next without any disconnect whatsoever. It's clear when the story has made the change, but the process of getting there doesn't feel jarring, which gives the show a bingeable quality similar to a thriller like Death Note. Togashi never has to bend time or locations to fit his story. Each individual event plays out in a deliberate, controlled sequence. Nothing feels contrived or spontaneous because the continuity is never broken. There is no reset button, no moving back to square one after everything has been put back in place. A new arc begins precisely where the last left off. Gon and friends go directly from the Hunter exam to Kukuru Mountain. Gon and Killua go from Kukuru Mountain to Heaven's Arena. They then return to Whale Island before setting out for Yorknew. Greed Island is being sold at the Yorknew auction, so the boys don't have to go anywhere once the Phantom Troop conflict is resolved. After beating the game, Gon and Killua are transported directly to Kite, setting the Chimera Ant arc in motion. Once the Ants are defeated, Killua spends the next arc protecting his sister so she can heal Gon. The only time that Togashi does pull time skips in the story is when you'd least expect it, during the middle of an arc. Even then, Togashi does so with a clear purpose in mind. By cutting directly from Gon's fight with Hanzo to the fallout of the remaining fights, Togashi uses the story's structure to force the audience to empathize with Gon. We only learn of Killua's actions through a flashback. Just like Gon, we weren't there to witness Killua's fight with Illumi, and as such, we weren't there to stop Killua from assassinating Bodoro. By undercutting the tension, Togashi makes the viewer feel helpless, even frustrated. We lose our dramatic payoff just like Gon loses his friend. Togashi employs the exact same technique in the Chimera Ant arc. Gon and Killua are fighting Knuckle and Shoot, then we cut to the four arriving at NGL. We don't actually see Gon's defeat until after we've already been spoiled on it, which strengthens the impact of this line for the same reasons I mentioned earlier.
弱いことがこんなに悔しいなんて思わなかった。
For comparison, Naruto follows a distinct mission-by-mission structure. Take down Zabuza in the Land of Waves. Okay, what's next? Chunin exams. What's next? Track down Tsunade, and so on. Dragon Ball was mostly made up on the fly, so there are several arcs that felt like they could have been the end of the story. Cell, Namek, the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, Piccolo. Because these arcs can feel so definitive, the one that follows has little to no leftover momentum to strengthen it beyond the odd plot thread here and there. Yeah, Vegeta's character arc might not have ended until the Buu saga, but that same arc also contradicts his decisive vow to never fight again. Gohan didn't learn to control and accept his power until his battle with Cell, but was the notion that Gohan would one day inherit his father's role as Earth's savior ever hinted at? It was heavily implied that Gon could become stronger than his father. At age 4, he was stronger than Goku was at 12. But if Gon was going to be a fighter at this stage in the game, the story necessitated a detail like that. How else would you justify a 6-year-old standing toe-to-toe with the likes of Vegeta and Frieza? But even when Gohan and Krillin were focal characters for the majority of the Frieza arc, it was Goku who showed up at the last minute to save the day. What was he doing in the meantime? Nothing to strengthen his personal connection to the arc's narrative, that's for sure. What I've always found interesting about Hunter x Hunter's main quartet is that they often go their separate ways between arcs. Each character has their own interests, and those interests don't always overlap. Since they aren't forced to stay together like a 3-man squad in Naruto, they split up on numerous occasions. Togashi's skill in using these characters can't just be attributed to the depth of their personalities. It's the way in which those personalities influence where they are in the world at any given time that makes them so compelling. For example, having Kurapika around during the Chimera Ant arc would have been amazing, but because he was tied down by prior obligations to the Nostrad family, He had no reason to be there. Other titles fail at giving their characters that kind of flexibility. Goku's friends are always going to be together with Goku at the start of each arc unless the narrative needs to create tension by them not being there, in which case they will just not be around for an unexplained reason. The only truly flexible characters in Naruto are Sasuke and Jiraiya, with one abandoning the village to pursue his own goals and the other constantly running around on reconnaissance missions. The rest of the supporting cast can generally be found somewhere in the village they belong to, mostly the Hidden Leaf. Because the characters in Hunter x Hunter are so flexible, Togashi can cycle them in and out of the story whenever he wants, with little consequence. So what exactly does each arc accomplish in relation to the others? Let's look at the timeline. The Zoldyck family mini-arc begins hot off the heels of the Hunter exam. Killua has retreated to his family's estate after Ilumi brainwashed him into killing Bordero, so Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika chase after him. Once Killua returns to the group, Kurapika and Leorio go their separate ways. The four agree to meet in York New City on September 1st, which sets the timeline between now and then. Gon's broken arm is allowed to heal organically over the course of the arc, which feels more natural than simply cutting to a shot of Gon saying, "My arm is healed," right before he and Killua regroup. In Heaven's Arena, Gon needs to gain power so he can punch Hisoka in the face and return his Hunter exam tag. Killua wants to hang out with Gon, but he also wants power so he can one day confront his brother. The two also need money, which will come in handy later on during the York New arc. Hisoka's presence forces Gon and Killua to awaken their Nen, which will become the standard battle mechanic for the rest of the story. What's really interesting about Nen is how it had already impacted the story before it was officially introduced. Gon uses Zetsu to tail Hisoka in Phase 4 of the Hunter exam. Ilumi's malicious intent overwhelms Killua during the tournament in the same way that Hisoka's prevents the boys from entering the 200th floor. Not only had Togashi figured out what Nen would be early on, but he also thought of clever ways to foreshadow its eventual reveal. Learning to use Nen also serves as the final stage of the already densely layered Hunter exam. Seriously, I know that some people criticize that arc for not really showcasing the best elements of Hunter x Hunter, but even if I agreed with you, that arc still does an amazing job of defining how skilled and nuanced a true hunter is. It's during the Heaven's Arena chapters that we begin to learn more about the Phantom Troop through Hisoka and Machi, who gets her early introduction here. This is yet another instance of Togashi using his characters to brilliant effect. He doesn't just insert the pre-established Hisoka into the troop to give them credibility, which in and of itself is a smart move. He also uses him to flesh out Machi's personal quirks, which gives us even more insight into who the troop is before we actually meet the whole faction. By doing this, we now have two established faces whom the remaining troop members can play off of, which helps us develop a quicker, stronger investment in them. After Gon cuts the final major plot thread left over from the Hunter exam, he and Killua return to Whale Island, where Mito tells Gon what she knows about Jing. This pit stop lays the groundwork for Jing's driving motivation once he eventually enters the fold nearly 100 episodes later. Another strength in Hunter x Hunter's story is the amount of breathing room that Togashi creates through the use of falling action. This additional material, while being highly entertaining in its own right, allows time for the viewer to recover, while Togashi sets up new plot points that he can expand on in a future arc. Sometimes this is just a single episode, while in other cases it could be an entire arc. Without the Zoldyck saga, for example, the jump from the Hunter exam to Heaven's Arena would have felt rushed. And that doesn't even take into account the plot threads that Togashi established and would come back to later on. Gon's fight with Hisoka serves as the climax of Heaven's Arena, but while a lesser author might have jumped straight from that battle to the York New arc, Togashi doesn't. Instead, we get 2 episodes of Gon and Killua hanging out on Whale Island. While this is important in laying the groundwork for Greed Island, it's even more important in establishing Gon and Killua's relationship moving forward. It also serves as a short calm before the storm. Togashi lets the tensions settle before blasting us with Kurapika's dark and stressful war against the Phantom Troop. Speaking of Kurapika, an additional episode is dedicated to his struggle with the Nen system, which shows how a pro hunter cannot function without Nen. This episode serves as a bridge between the upbeat, heartwarming tone of the last 2 episodes and the harsh reality that consumes the upcoming events. Jing had also left behind a box for Mito to give Gon only after he had become a hunter. Gon could only open that box after he had awakened his Nen, which he was only prompted to do after encountering Hisoka at Heaven's Arena. Gon only went to Heaven's Arena because Killua had brought him there. and Killua wouldn't have been able to do that if Gon and the others hadn't gone to get him from the Zoldyck mansion. And the only reason why Killua was there was because Illumi had brainwashed him in the Hunter exam. Everything is connected! The contents of this box introduce Greed Island to the story, and the only way that Gon and Killua can acquire a copy of Greed Island is by attending the York New auction. We already knew that Leorio was planning to be there, so his appearance isn't a pure coincidence. The initially planned meeting between the main four doesn't happen though, because Kurapika is busy with a job that he had sought out so he could be close to the auction. A tie between the auction and the troupe had already been established by this point, so it wasn't hard to believe that Gon and Killua, now looking to the auction for Greed Island, would encounter the troupe at some point as well. Because Kurapika had distanced himself at the end of the Zoldyck arc, months before arriving in York New, Gon and Killua don't know about his Nen ability. So when the troupe is looking for a chain user, of course the boys wouldn't know who that is. Nothing about that fact is in question, and that's a pure testament to Togashi's skill as a writer. This brief scene in Heaven's Arena had already told us that Hisoka couldn't be trusted by the troupe, so while his alliance with Kurapika is quite shocking, it doesn't feel out of place either. If anything, the shock comes from the notion that Kurapika would resort to such drastic measures. But even that isn't unbelievable given the interaction between the two in the Hunter exam. A big reason why York New is my favorite arc in the series, as opposed to, say, Chimera Ant, is based on how impeccably interwoven this and Greed Island are with one another. The second contributor to my love for York New is Gon's limited role. He takes a back seat, both literally and fundamentally, to focus on Kurapika's plight in the same way that Togashi did. It's rare for a protagonist to fade into the background like this without being completely cut from a given arc. He isn't inactive like Goku on Namek, or in a different location like Naruto during the attack on Konoha. Gon plays a key part in the conflict, but he's not the central focus of it. Kurapika is. Greed Island was Gon's primary goal for the auction, his main reason for coming to York New, and Killua constantly brings that up throughout the war against the Phantom Troop. Gon always had something to lose by helping Kurapika, yet he helped him anyway. That fact plays up the redeeming aspects of his character that often seem to get overlooked nowadays due to his twisted morality. Skipping ahead, the Phantom Troop enters Greed Island to find a Nen exorcist to free Chrollo from Kurapika's Nen. Hisoka also enters the game to help the troop help him get his fight with Chrollo. Gon and Killua begin fleshing out prototypes for their respective Nen abilities, but their training doesn't conclude here. Let me repeat that. In the arc where Gon and Killua must train to combat the big baddies, they don't finish their training. I cannot understate how refreshing that is. Think of how many times a character develops a new technique, or acquires a new power, and uses it to defeat the next villain he faces. It's part of the shonen formula. In Greed Island, Gon gets the opportunity to perfect his Jajanken, but when he fails to do so in the time he is given, Killua and Bisky make him stop so they can discuss an alternative strategy. Instead of defeating Genthru's gang with raw power, Gon's team defeats them with tactics. And I love that. Gon and Killua test their abilities here, but they don't develop their true trump cards until the next arc. The transition from Greed Island to Chimera Ant was the most akin to a hard reset that the series had to offer so far, but that only emphasized just how dark that arc was compared to everything that came before it. In saying that though, the tone shift and some of the ideas the arc explores had been gradually building for a while. Gon's mental breakdown had been hinted at by Wing and Sapile, among other characters. Kurapika's restraint and vow foreshadowed the extreme that Gon would take in his fight against Pito, and the effects of Illumi's oppressive nature had been given attention in the Hunter exam and York New, making Killua's progression all the stronger. Those arcs weren't about Killua, but Togashi still managed to squeeze in some important character beats, which is something I'd like to see other stories do more often. Like I said earlier, Gon and Killua finish their training from Greed Island and begin developing their special abilities. Gon learns to fire his Nen as a projectile, and Killua develops Godspeed. Then there's Kite, who the 2011 anime kind of screwed over by not introducing in episode 1. He was in chapter 1 of the manga. Gon looked up to him like a hero, and he was one of the main sources of Gon's desire to become a hunter. But to be fair, that doesn't do much to change his emotional impact. I can't say whether or not Togashi had planned to use Kite in this way from the very beginning, but given his early introduction, it's obvious that Togashi had a significant plan for the guy. If anything, him being introduced into the story so early only plays up the shock value of him getting killed early into the arc. The election ends with Gon and Killua fulfilling their respective goals that they established back in Heaven's Arena and going their separate ways. Gon's goal was to find his dad. He found his dad. Killua's goal was to help Gon look for Jing until he discovered what he wanted to do. He now wants to protect Aluka. Kanary and Goto could not have played such an important part in this arc so easily if they hadn't already been introduced right after the Hunter exam. Goto's death would have been far less impactful if he had just been introduced, like Tsubone and Amane. The sudden importance of politics had also been hinted at throughout the Chimera Ant arc by Nav and Morel, and I'm sure that the Dark Continent arc also had an abundance of plot threads leading into it. I can't say for certain, as I haven't actually read it, but I know for a fact that there's at least one fight that was hinted at ages ago. By consistently foreshadowing upcoming arcs in the middle of the current one, the inevitable transitions between them are almost effortless. Go watch Hunter x Hunter if you haven't already, and even if you have, go watch it again. It's worth your time, I assure you. While we're on the topics of things that are worth your time, might I also suggest my previous Hunter x Hunter video? Or maybe that subscribe button? How about a follow on Twitter? Alright, I'll stop now. Thanks as always to King Kevin30, Stone Cold 007, India Charbonneau, Double One, and everyone else for supporting me on Patreon. And until next time, keep on YouTubing.